process, but
okay, that makes sense. All right, so I'm Taylor. I do MyEtherWallet. For those who don't know, it's a client-side web wallet. We don't store any user information. We don't, you can run it offline if you want. Most people don't. Most people love going online and putting their private keys in, which we are working on ending quickly. The ENS, so the ENS, part of the difficulties that we had supporting the ENS was they were not technical. They were all user-based. And one of the things that our wallet has always provided, and one of the reasons that so many people use it, is that we answer all the emails and tweets and Facebook messages and Skype messages and Slack messages and text messages and even the occasional phone call. So, we started out as a side project. It was literally me and my partner, and we just wanted to build an easy way to interact with Ethereum. We both had day jobs. We both worked them. We maybe averaged for the first year, God, we probably worked like 40 hours total the first year. Like we just built this little tool and then it just sat. And then in 2016, we spent some more time on it. And then early 2017, if you remember, the price of ETH went from about 10, where it had been sitting for about 6 months, and then it hit 50, and then it hit 100, and then it hit 200, and then it hit 300, and then it hit 400, and it was just like bam, bam, bam. And that timing, so the timing of that price rise was really spot on with ENS just hopping right in and starting the whole auction process. And so what we saw was massive user adoption, massive entry into the space by users who really were not entering the space because they love Ethereum or because they're technical people or because they're devs, which is what we were familiar with. They were people who were trying to get in, trying to get rich, trying to get tokens, loving the ICOs, etc. And it was just different. We can't say oh, certain users shouldn't exist in the space because they're not X, right? Or they're only interested in X. But I will say that we'd gotten really good at supporting developers and technical-minded people, and we had set up our wallet that spoke to that, and it also spoke to an audience that had been around, and even the new users that entered the space would use MyEtherWallet, and usually if they're in the US, Coinbase MyEtherWallet was the normal thing. And then they were curious and they'd do geth, they would do mist, they would do parity, they would do all of the above. We would see, basically we didn't have a huge user retention pool. We'd bring people into the space and then they'd go off onto the actual clients. Now we don't see that. Users don't move on to anything, they stay with us, and it's crazy. Over that period of time, generally, our support tickets went from about 30 a day in December, January to over 1,000 a day. We were not prepared at all for this. So specifically about the ENS, that kind of gives you an idea of this ecosystem. The ENS was, when was it finally? The first one, May 4th?
Was the official launch date.
So, May 4th, wow. When, people were generally really excited about it, we had been hearing from users, that were curious about how they were going to register a name and what the process was going to be if we were going to be providing a UI for that, if they should start syncing Mist, et cetera, et cetera. We had actually developed the first 2 steps, so the auction, the first 2 steps of the auction we had developed, but it hadn't really been super tested. We knew it worked well enough, but we were just kind of winging it. And then right before the launch, we stayed up all night. We were using testnet. We got everything really dialed in. And then I think the very first names, we had a list of the that you provided. the list of these names, like silly just letter names that would be available at night that first half hour. So we stayed up all night, which was super fun, obviously. And, you know, like when we bid on that first name and it worked, and like, you know, the feedback that it gave was like pretty good. And if I tried to bid too low, it was, you know, give you an error message. Like I was pretty proud of that. I was like, okay, we did okay. And then we woke up the next day and it was fine and everyone was really excited. Everyone was bidding on names. And then we woke up the next day and then that's when like, pardon my French, but shit just hit the fan, and shit kept hitting the fan for about, I would say the first 2 weeks were the worst. I know Nick was not sleeping very much either. Me and Nick were on Skype probably all hours. You know, I lurked in the MetaMask Slack and same thing, people were just, I mean, we were not prepared for this. So I'm gonna talk about some of the specific things we've learned. And keep in mind that while I do front-end development, I'm not like a hardcore programmer, and most of what I take away from experiences have to do with like users and product design and user experience and stuff. So that's where my insights are. So the first thing that we have to say, and this is like our internal kind of saying these days, is people are stupid. Like, we say it probably 100 times a day. It's the answer to any support ticket ever. You just are like, you're stupid. And then you have to go and be like, okay, what did we do to create, like, did we do anything to create this situation? How can we prevent this situation in the future? Where did the misunderstanding happen? Did the misunderstanding happen because something like they don't understand like the underlying system? So people who, for example, like blame us when they can't get in on ICO, you know, it's an education problem. They think that we're like literally preventing them from, you know, buying these tokens. When in reality, you know, the network's overloaded, the servers are overloaded, they're not using enough gas, etc. It's not my personal fault that you did not get your token, I'm sorry. You know, so with the auction process, there was a lot of new terminology that we saw. So we saw, you know, like words like reveal, where I figured out what it meant and I understood it, but people really didn't understand why they had to reveal. They didn't understand like what the underlying sort of tech for the auction process is. They didn't understand that it was a blind auction somehow. Like I'm not quite sure how, but like really still to this day, like they're, you know, like, can I see how many other people bid and what they bid and, you know, all this stuff. And they also this was like one of the lesser problems, so I have it down on my list, but so surprising. Like the time sensitive stuff, like the fact that you need to do something and then wait a couple days and then do something and then wait a couple days, people, for some reason, there are people that just did not understand that, and they'll like email me today and be like, hi, I bid on a name like 3 months ago, I was just wondering what I do now. And like I said, it surprised me, so like we have like big red warnings everywhere, what are you doing? So I would say one of the bigger mistakes that we kind of had control over, we had a decision on, was the timing. We actually sped up the auctions for the actual launch, and I think that was a mistake because we were not prepared to provide the support. Like we really, really, really weren't. And it caused me personally like a lot of, like my husband literally found me outside on our patio, like chain smoking, crying, because like it was just like I've been answering these emails and people were like losing money and I like could help them, but I couldn't, like, you know, that kind of stuff. It was like just, you know, the world was crashing down. And when you see the same thing over and over again, it doesn't take much to like trigger this like, holy crap, we failed so hard. But in reality, you have to keep in mind that, I don't know, like whatever you said, 185,000 names have been registered successfully, you know. So speeding things up, making things more time sensitive, you know, without knowing exactly like what users were gonna do and have the most trouble with was definitely like I would say a mistake today. If we could go back in time and do it over, I would say give at least like a week or so. Specifically between like the reveal or like the time you have to reveal. Because what we determined was that there were a couple different issues. People either didn't save the information, which was actually quite rare, because people, we have big red warnings, we're like, take a screenshot, we're like, copy and paste this. We say it over and over and over again. We say it before they bid, we say it after they place their bid. We say it on Reddit and Twitter, and like, you know, people learn pretty quickly. But what people would do is like, they have these spreadsheets, or they have these mechanisms that they're using to like keep track of all the names that they're going to bid on, or they're revealing, or they're going to finalize, or whatever it is. And they would get things mixed up. So, you know, I know Nick has saved some, I've saved some, where we're either brute forcing because they forgot their secret, or we're brute forcing based on their spreadsheet that they provide, that, you know, we basically go and try to find the hash for like, you know, okay, this is the name, but we don't know the amount that you actually bid. We don't know the secret. So we'll take all their existing ones and basically brute force it like that. And we've gotten, you know, in some of those. We didn't have any trouble. The secret, actually, we didn't have any trouble with it. People tended to either, like I said, like not save anything, or get things mixed up. I would say that, surprisingly enough, the bid amount, having to know that, that was the bigger one that people found a bit surprising. They didn't understand, and we put a lot of warnings. Like, I personally didn't understand it first either. Like, I was like, why do you have to know how much you bid? And isn't it the same as the amount of ETH you sent? And then, you know, we had to circle back and reread everything, and I was like, okay. So yeah, and then, you know, that ties into the bigger sort of picture of people didn't understand what the reveal process was and why it was there. And so I think one of the biggest things that helped wasn't necessarily like us answering emails or like people learning. It was just like that general overall education about how this process worked and like how cool it was. Like, I mean, if you think about it, where this auction mechanism is like completely decentralized and secret, like really secret. And so when people sort of were able to put this like concept together that in order for something to be on the public blockchain but not public, you know, this is the mechanism that's being used. When they got that and they grasped that core concept, everything else on top of that suddenly like fell into place. And so that's one thing that is a really big takeaway for me personally, like for the product itself, is that you can explain the top level of things and, you know, tell them to save their secret 1,000 bazillion times, but you're gonna have a better time if they understand why they need to save that secret, or why they need to save that bid amount, because then they'll just do it naturally. You don't have to put the red warnings up, they just understand it. Okay, and then I have to cover a couple technical things. So there was a bug in one of the libraries that we used in the mechanism of how to handle strings versus hex. So as you know, like hex is OX, and then strings are strings. And ENS names are strings, except that the library would try to treat them as hex if they started with OX. And people would try to register an ENS name that started with OX. And I don't know like the details of the bug. Do you know? Is it?
I can't recall.
Yeah,
either.
I don't know exactly what it would do, but it was not good. You weren't bidding on the name you thought you bid on, I know that. And also it wasn't consistent. So this is like when we're talking about consensus, like on the top level, like everything gets really bad if like you have 3 people who support the ENS and like all 3 give you a different hash for a name. And that's why we need more support for everything, because that's where you find these little weird bugs, you know.
Don't forget the issue where people were trying to reserve names with dots in them.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's on the list too. So the other one that was 100% our fault, and we should have seen that one. The hex thing, I didn't see coming, sorry. The dot thing, so there's a couple. So when you have like a validation library, right? It's going to be like, is this valid or not? And dots are valid. Like you can have an ENS name that is like Taylor.MyEtherWallet.e, right? But you can't bid on Taylor.MyEtherWallet. You can bid on MyEtherWallet, then MyEtherWallet becomes would become like a registrar itself, and then you bid Taylor or whatever. So the problem was that the initial, I think, week or so, if you could bid on Taylor.MyEtherWallet because the validation library that we used was saying it was valid, because it was valid, but it's not like, we should have been using, what we're doing now is we're using 2 different validations. So we have validation for like when we resolve an ENS name to an address, and then we have validation for when you're bidding. And so when you're bidding, you can't have a dot, but when you are like trying to resolve a name on the front end, then you can have a dot. So there's like a lot of little things like this that sneak up on you, and it's partially due to like a young ecosystem and the fact that we're a small team, and the fact that we're like basically writing the documentation as we go and learning as we go. I'm hoping though, like as we move forward, especially now that like there's seriously a lot of users using it now, like especially our product. That's one of the things that we're not taking as lightly as we used to, just because there's a lot of people using our site.
Do you have numbers?
We don't. We've gone, I mean, our growth is like, we're like this, and then it's like that. Like, it's crazy. I think the best sort of graph that gives you an idea of like what we're going through is the ICO graph on Twitter, where it's like, there's like 4 slides. Have you seen this one?
No, sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I have. Yeah, I love that graph.
Yeah, so like you see like token card, like Airline, like, and you're like, oh man, those are big spikes in traffic. And then you click to the next slide, and like Banker shows up and just like dwarfs everyone. You're like, man. And then you go to the next slide, and then like status is just like, and then Banker's like this little baby right here. That's basically been our lives for the last like few months. Is like every time we're like, okay, we made it, we're okay. And then like some other like lurking giant appears. It's really like it's quite unbelievable, honestly. Like I haven't fully processed like where we are right now and like how many people use our product. But I did have like sort of like a moment. We were in Austin and we went to the meetup there, where were we? In Texas somewhere.
Dallas.
We're at the Dallas meetup. And we walk in and like literally there's probably like 50 people, and they all have like MyEtherWallet open on their computers. And I was like, oh my God, they were using our thing. They're using our thing. And they're like, yeah, like they're all Ethereum people, like they're here for the Ethereum meetup. And I'm like, no, but they're on our site. Like that, we built that. And everyone's like, yeah, duh. So I don't know, like it's mind-boggling for me at least. I mean, we can talk more openly and about specifics and users and stuff. I can like pull numbers for the support tickets if we want. Most of the support tickets we got were general confusion questions like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing at all. I mean, honestly, if you're interested in like seeing how users interact with Ethereum, our support inbox, like I wish I could just open source it, because it is just, you do not know your users until you read the support box. It's amazing. And then I would say the trouble revealing you know, we have a pretty good, so we have tools that they can use themselves to basically try to like brute force themselves. We have a pretty good like walkthrough on how it works and what steps they need to take and why they need to take them. You know, one of my hypothesis about the graphs that Nick was showing about the drop off, I actually think it's because the mentality of like the market for these names was at the beginning like, well, there's no risk. Like, we'll just throw our money in it, and then if we get the name, well, you know, the worst that happens is that in a year we get the money back. No worries. Like, I'll just throw all my money at it. And then instead, what happened was like, you know, even people that, let's say they bid on 500 names, it just takes that one bid for 500 ETH or 1,000 ETH, and that's just gone. And so that ROI when you can't reveal is zero. I think that's why we started seeing it drop, was that it was about the time that even the most experienced people lost some money. Even like the name squatters lost some money. You know, the name squatters and stuff, they didn't really email us early on. Those were all users. Later in the process, like I would say 3, 4, or 5 weeks in, that's when we started seeing people that were like, you know, and those you can't, like, there's nothing that we could do. You know, when you're looking at an account that maybe has like 20,000 transactions, that's all names, like all either reveals, finalizes, resolving, all of that, you don't know anything. You know nothing. Like, if it's an individual user, I can go back through the transaction history and be like, well, I know that you did bid 1 ETH because you literally don't have an outgoing transaction for 1 ETH. So let's try something else, you know. The other thing is, so we actually don't own MyEtherWallet.eth. So, okay. You have to understand for a second.
Do you have to pick up with it?
I don't think so. I don't think you do. I think it's one of the, I mean, he also owns Shapeshift, so we're in a good company, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, not. You're with a clever shark.
Well,
Sorry.
I was pretty flattered when like they bid the same amount on MyEtherWallet as Shapeshift. I was like, man, we're playing with the big dogs now. This is exciting. But you know, we made the decision early on. You have to keep in mind we're an open source project. At this point, so we added some monetization features, affiliate programs in February. But we had no idea like how sustainable that was going to be. Everything else is just donation based, and we've done very well with the donations. Like, we have a very, very generous community, and we held those donations, so they've become very, 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 very generous. Very. Our first donation was 10 ETH when it was worth like $5. So like, it's fantastic now. Like, those servers are happy. Like, we're happy, but we were not willing to. We don't have 500 ETH. Like, we don't have that much, so we were not willing to spend. You know, we weren't willing to throw whatever 100,000 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100 even. I don't know what we ended up bidding. We ended up. I think we bid around like 50, maybe 80. I can't remember. We took some money. We knew that we weren't going to get it. We had accepted it early on. We had seen some of the other names. You know, basically we bid on it hoping that maybe some, you know, magic would happen and we would get it, but we were prepared to not. And I think the top bid was 500 ETH, which was.
Well, we had someone offer to pay a lot of ETH to buy the domain for us, and we just didn't. We're not about that. Like,
it's too much money.
Feed into that.
Did they ask you for something in return?
No, it's someone that works with us. That literally was like, that just has a bunch of money. It's like, I will put 500 ETH up there.
Yeah,
If
we
you
had
want
a
it. We were
few
like,
people.
no.
We had a few people that are like, you know, generous people that work with us, or we know personally or whatever, that have large holdings that were willing. And this is, you know, back to how I mentioned that the mentality was like, it's a no risk thing. You can just like put your ETH in the name, and the worst thing that happens is you pull your ETH out the next year. Well, in this case, like, it's not quite that simple. Like, yeah, if you want your name or some random set of words or whatever, and you don't end up using it, you can, either sell it or you can get it back, and no worries. When we're talking about MyEtherWallet.eth, the intention was to use that as a subdomain. So basically, you would have like Taylor.MyEtherWallet.eth or whatever. In that case, you're not in a good position to ever get that money back, because even if basically our company would have to cease to exist, and all of our users would have to be warned, I guess. I don't even know how we can handle it. If you have, let's say we have 1,000 users, let's say we have 10,000 users that have like a MyEtherWallet subdomain, selling that on the aftermarket or releasing that domain can lead to considerable problems. So internally we knew that whatever we bid, we had to accept that money was probably going to be locked up forever, and that was going to be the price that we paid. Other people didn't quite get this, which is why they were willing to throw 500 ETH. I honestly it's kind of a relief, because I don't know what we would. I don't know if we bid 500. I don't know.
Well, you'd have to try to find 500 ETH to give them if they wanted their money back, so
Yeah.
they wouldn't have to deregister.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we would be forever indebted to them just for the offer itself. I have no doubt that at some point we'll have 500 ETH and that it'll be fine. But
is it possible that in a year a lot of these domains are just going to expire out of the system? You might just get it in a year for buying it.
Yeah,
Well, maybe
it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. I think that the initial, I know personally, I have a lot of random little domains that I love. We have, what are some of the good ones? Oh, we have stash of .eth and little cute things like that. We have silly little ones. I think, because basically if we were ever testing, a lot of times I would just buy another domain. So I think I have poopypants.eth, and then we also have
Mr. Poopy Pants, just Poopy Pants?
just poopy pants, and then we also have TV head or something, and we're it's our two test accounts are those two. I think that that initial love and just you just buy domains just for fun, random names that you have no use for. I think that we saw that die off after a bit, and I think that in a year it's probably going to be about the same. I think we're going to see it feel more like a regular sort of domain registry experience where you're starting a company, you want to get a domain, and so you get your domain. I do think that there's going to be, when we see an aftermarket, a really good aftermarket, and it becomes a very popular, easy to do, trustworthy thing, I think that we'll probably start seeing people that continue to make a business out of buying and then reselling domains. Subdomains are super exciting. We definitely have not seen the full potential with those. We have not done our subdomain yet. It's in the works with everything else that we have going on. But our intentions for the subdomains is we would basically have a subdomain or a few subdomains to choose from, and new users, when they went through the onboarding process, would be invited to basically, once they got ETH in their account, the next step would be actually to get a name for super cheap, very cheap. We would go for volume over profits per name, and it would just be a super simple. They pay a fixed fee and they get the name, and it's already sent to their new address, and you just call it a day.
First come, first serve.
Yeah, really simple. Really, you can't do anything. We've talked about, Nick has the idea of some of these popular, really good names, having those be subdomains as well, or creating a market where that enables people to do that, which is really cool. I also think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens after a year, whether, I know right now with .coms, looking for expired names and picking them up when people get to register them is a thing. I'm assuming that that'll happen here as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't predict the future. Last time I did that, I was like, oh yeah, ETH won't be at over 100 like in 2017. That's ridiculous. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions or anything, or?
Yeah. Well, first of all, actually, quickly, has who's ever used MyEtherWallet?
Yeah, see, this is what I'm
So thank
talking
you.
about. Like, I don't.
But okay, now, so the actual question, when you were looking at the auction process, did you consider allowing people to, for example, provide an email address and then you can remind them when the reveal time starts? And what were you thinking around that?
Yeah, so with MyEtherWallet, like I do a lot of UX for like the regular world, quote unquote, where it's like a given that you have like 3 or 4 analytics platforms. It's a given that you have walls up everywhere to collect emails. You have newsletter signers everywhere. You're constantly trying to get that user data. With MyEtherWallet, where like it's the opposite. Like one, I don't have to do that because I don't have a client telling me to literally put 5 newsletters and 18 analytics platforms on their site. But also like I'm very privacy minded, and I'm like, this is crypto. Like I don't. As a user, I don't want people to be like tracking me, and I don't want some random site to have like my address and my IP address and my email address and my ENS names and my potential ENS names linked. So, when you look at the features that MyEtherWallet does have, you'll start to see this. Like we don't ask for your emails anymore. Like we don't have a newsletter. Like we don't do that. The reason is that I don't want that information. We are talking about doing certain things because like as the site grows, I need to know what our users are struggling with, and currently we don't have analytics. It's very, very hard to like, the support box is like how I just determine what people struggle with, which is not sustainable, obviously, because I can't answer all those tickets. So we considered it. I'd love to do it. As we grow and we get like we get some of the finer details worked out, like, what sort of company we are, and we have a privacy policy and stuff, you'll probably start seeing more and more features like that. But if you couldn't, you can just imagine that, you'd have, there's potentially a server somewhere that would have every address that you've accessed, transactions linked to your IP address, which would then be linked to your email address, which would then be linked to your ENS names. And that's not something that I want to, because right now, like, we do have law enforcement reach out to us more and more every day, and it's very nice to be able to tell them that, explain to them that we're client side and we don't have anything. Like, when it's really nice. Like, it's unbelievably nice. I don't have to worry about it. It does suck, the phishing things that have been going on lately. I would love to have more data. I'd love to be able to go and, get information and see if they're using our site, which I don't think they are, but, maybe they did one day and I could figure out who they were and I could be like a little secret detective and solve all the world's problems. But it would probably end up being like a very waste of time than anything. So yeah, we'll see. Ideally, I think one of the features that just never made it onto the live site was to do at least generate like a little calendar notification thing, so you could like basically download and the whatever VCL file or whatever it is, which would then like go onto your calendar and give you the information, and then you could like do an alert, which would be better and would also still be client side. I don't know why that didn't make it on. I think it had to do with the, like, calendars are complicated apparently. And the library that we were gonna use to like generate these things was like another like meg or 2 or something for this one feature. And like we're trying to like reduce the size of our packages, not like throw in 2 more megs, like just for a calendar feature. So I think that the intention was to basically kind of like do a little roll your own type situation, but it just never obviously came to be. We could still do that, but by the time we spent so much time trying to like get up to be able to support people and to be able to handle the traffic and stuff. And by the time we did that, like everything was dying down. So, you know, these days we get, I don't know, Kevin, how many emails do we get, you think, regarding ENS?
Oh, actually, we're not getting that many right now.
Yeah.
So like we were getting a bunch, and like I mean, it's either reveal or like people that are trying to send a disguised bid that's higher than the account balance.
Oh yeah, I think we talked about that one.
Yeah.
We changed the language 3 times on that, what we called it. I think right now it's called the disguise bid.
And then there's a string of letters that says something
Yeah.
to the effect of, you need this money in your account in order to place this bid.
And they still try to send their actual bids higher than the disguise bid, and they still try to do a disguise bid of like 200 ETH, and then they don't have 200 ETH in their account. And then they email us. I think it used to be called like the mask bid. We called it something else. The disguise bid. I don't know if it was. I don't know if people learned on their own or if it helped people learn, but it hasn't been changed since then. So that's the winner, I guess.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the auction process? So I remember Nick wrote like Reddit post like 2-3 months ago about maybe all these ICO currently it's all time-based. People like structuring the traffic, and he suggested using a kind of blind mixing with supply auction to do crowd sale, so like people are not bound to the time.
Right.
If all the ICO companies start doing that, I don't know how fast it could be supported by MyEtherWallet, but somehow if you decide to support because it becomes a common way, does it confuse more people or?
That's a good question. I think that, that's a really good question. In theory, if you have like a good enough product and user experience and the design is good enough, nothing should confuse the user. Like you can make something very, very complex, very easy for them to understand. If the ICO is doing like this blind auction or whatever auction mechanism in general were to become a thing, I would say that the biggest thing would be determining what sort of what the similarities are with the ENS and what the differences are from a user perspective, and using the knowledge that you have already built with users with the ENS, using that knowledge, you know, where it applies, and then calling out the specifics about the differences and stuff. Because the thing is that if you have similarities, like, but there are differences, you can cause great confusion. And if you have a full new thing, it's going to cause confusion no matter what. The one thing I will say about if it's like ICOs though is that, well, I guess you wouldn't have a set price per token, or you would?
I think not.
No?
Decide at the end based on who participates.
Right.
And how much.
I would leave it up to the ICOs. If you're gonna try to get like $100 million, then you can figure it out. Like you figure out how to educate your users. I mean, these are hard problems. They're really hard problems.
And these are problems that people in mechanism design have had for a while. They come up with architectures for auctions, and then people can't use them. And that's one of the main reasons why a lot of mechanism designers are a little bit unhappy about the success of their field, is because a lot of the great results that they've come up with, no one understands and no one can use. Even though theoretically they are, you know.
It's really tough. It's gonna be, I think what I'm most excited about for like the coming years, not necessarily like seeing like more products get built or whatever, but is seeing how the space evolves, like, and how the users evolve, and how other people approach like user experience in their product and educating the user base and stuff. Because at this point, we really, I would say about 50% of our support tickets aren't about MyEtherWallet. They're about Ethereum. They're about tokens that are like, I can't get a hold of this token that I bought and I don't know where it is, and they sent my withdrawals to this different thing and I don't know. It's about like Poloniex and Kraken and Bitfinex and Bittrex, Coinbase. We answer the Coinbase ones because I know they're like underwater and you're never gonna get an answer from them. But some of the other ones, I'm like, come on, guys. You know, so I'm really like, I feel like the users that have entered the space and the number of users is not aligned with the usability of Ethereum at this point. And I think that as we get more and more people in the space, and as you know, people's budgets go up, and as we get more designers and especially user experience people in the space, thinking about these problems, everything is going to improve. Like, you know, just because say like Status is building one product and their user experience for Status, like it's gonna filter through, it's gonna trickle down everywhere. You know, tutorials that we make for MyEtherWallet that explain like kind of the underlying architecture or whatever, there's so little about MyEtherWallet at the end of the day. It really is about Ethereum, and a lot of the stuff like we don't even brand anymore. We just like throw it out there and hope that something sticks to someone somewhere. Just because the core underlying stuff is really what people don't understand, and there's people that are like, well, they don't have to understand it, you just make it easier on top of it, but it's too early to just like try to hide everything, I think. Maybe not, I don't know.
I mean, you know my philosophy is I just tell them not to use it.
Yeah,
No, just
That's
come
our-
back later.
yeah,
That's what I do.
yeah, well, we've been having like a bit of a little like pushback with Coinbase, because Coinbase will be like, oh yeah, well, if you want to get in on this ICO or whatever, you have to use MyEtherWallet, and then we're like, no, go back to Coinbase if you're using it, go! And they're like, you know, oh, I just learned how to 2FA my account on MyEtherWallet. I'm like, go, turn around, go back! But they really want these tokens. Oh. We'll survive.
Yeah, user safety is really tough.
So I thought that account abstraction is going to be a really powerful tool for some of these problems.
Absolutely.
Because with account abstraction, like right now you can kind of almost do some of these things, but it's like that last inch isn't quite there. But with account abstract, you know, you can generate the pre-signed transaction that you can send with zero risk later.
Yeah. What's the timeline?
From a magic account that
Being delayed.
but I mean, it's still a delayed transaction that somebody still has to send. But with account abstraction, you can do that with zero risk on the sender side and things like that. I mean, it's not going to be a magic bullet solution. There's still going to be a ton of stuff to do, but
it's just because account abstraction allows someone to program a good solution doesn't mean that they won't also program solutions with lots of holes in them. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's what so I'm concerned actually about account abstraction because I think that like people will make buggy account abstraction.
But isn't that just isn't that the same concern about just the platform in general?
There's two types of accounts.
Yeah.
We're going to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, and we want this.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean,
It abstracts it so they're all the
you know, it's both a concern, but also, you know, it is really what you want. I mean, people don't seem to want something that does much less and it's safer.
The Parity wallet was probably the best security audit Ethereum's gotten. Because I guarantee you that everybody just dug through, oh, there was an easy one to find out there? And people went looking.
Oh, yeah.
There was the DAO hack also, you know, definitely like there's certain programming patterns that we slowly learn as a community, maybe not always as individuals, that we should avoid.
We need more good reference implementations out there. We don't have a decent token reference implementation, never learn anything else.
Yeah, we don't.
The ENS and registrars and resolvers, we have a single instance of each.